This program is brought to you by the Kentucky Small Business Development Center in Louisville. We provide the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to help you make sound business decisions. Thank you to the U.S. Small Business Administration for co-sponsoring our program and to our host organization, the University of Kentucky. Contact us at 502-625-0123 to get started.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Dave Etkin. I am the director here at the Louisville Small Business Development Center. We're part of the Kentucky Small Business Development Center network. So as always, just before we get started, I want to make sure everything's working because sometimes we are tech challenged. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see your chat function. And there's a button there that says chat. If not, take your cursor and hover down at the bottom. Hopefully that toolbar will pop up. Just press chat. And if you wouldn't mind, just say hello, tell us your name and where you're joining from. It's always so much fun for us to see where everybody is. So you just want to pop in, say hello, and let me know everything's working well. I'm going to do that right now. There's Kathy. Hey, Kathy, Louisville. Sellersburg. That's Janet. Hey, Janet. How are you today? Matthew from Prosser. Hey, Solette. Hey, Solette. I haven't heard from you in a while. You doing okay? Justin, Sherry, got a bunch of folks coming in here today. Thanks for joining us today on Tuesday. It's good to see everybody. Yeah, we've got plenty of people popping in today. So hey, Sherry, Solette, Catherine, Brekita. So thanks for joining today. As always, if we get started, now that you found the chat button, if you have any questions or comments for our speaker today, just put them in there and we'll get to them right away or at the end, whichever kind of seems appropriate. So that being said, you know, one of the first tenets of small business is to know your customer, kind of know your audience in a way, and understanding, you know, your audience or your customers, even your employees. I mean, it's a way to understand them from a generational standpoint is one way to do that. And we've got a great expert today and a good friend of ours, Katherine Skaggs from the Louisville Free Public Library. She's done a bunch of research and really has a lot of stuff to share on how we can understand and communicate better and work with better different generations within the population, within our stakeholder groups that we work with, you know, specifically the Millennial and Gen Z generations and how to communicate with them effectively. So Katherine, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
One more little housekeeping thing before we jump in. At the end, when we sign off, don't hit close because you'll see a survey that pops up. You wouldn't mind helping us out with that survey, give us some input on how we're doing and what we can do to improve, and any other ideas that you have. We are always interested in what you have to say. So, all right, Katherine, let's just get started. There you are within the bowels of the library there. You can see all the books behind you. So, so if you want to go ahead and share your screen, let's get started because it's of particular interest to me, and you know, with the number of people that we deal with, it's very important to understand this stuff. So, Katherine. And I think you're still on mute there too, Katherine. There we go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Katherine Skaggs, and I'm the Small Business Resources Librarian and the Louisville Free Public Library. So I'm the one you go to if you need help figuring out research for your small business. And one of those things I do is help with figuring out market type solutions or ideas for market research. And so ideas of breaking down people by their age is one of these things. So we're going to talk a little bit about millennials and Gen Z in the workplace and marketplace. One of these things that can be kind of vexing and difficult maybe if you're not used to it. So this is an overview and about what you can find out about millennials and Gen Z in the workplace and marketplace and how you can find that out, which is also a very interesting question that can be very useful to you when you're doing research for yourself. So let's get into it. So first off, the generation gap is real. My family talks about it all the time. And when it came up twice at consecutive meetings, I realized there was a real need to describe this gap and how to navigate it. So here's more about me by way of illustrating this problem. Fair warning, I'm probably about to make you feel old, so I'm sorry, but this will give you an idea of the context and why it matters. So first off, I was born on March 11th, 1985, so I'm 38 years old. This means that the Vietnam War ended a decade before I was born. Youch, right? I have never lived in a world without home computers and video games. Although we didn't have one at home, we definitely had computer lab at school, and if you were good and finished your math munchers, you got to play Oregon Trail. And I've played video games basically my entire teenage and adult life. The Berlin Wall fell when I was 4 years old. I was in high school on September 11th, 2001. I graduated college in spring 2007, and the economy imploded within a year. So these are kind of shared experiences that can, even though it's not universal for someone of the same age, these are nonetheless things that are going to be, because of time, similar to people of a similar age. So that's kind of what the use is of breaking down people by generation. It's not universal, but it can be very useful when talking about a large group of people and experiences they share and how this might change their behavior. So that's what it is. It can give generations sort of a personality or shared traits. It's a generalization, and it can be useful to help understand on a population-wide level these experiences and values that drive people, whether potential employees or customers, and which helps you target marketing accordingly and build better relationships with your employees, because tension at work and how to get actually people buying your stuff, there's a big part of that is actually generational driven, and we'll get into that. So who exactly are we talking about? So when we define American generations, I'm going to go with these breakdowns from the Pew Research Center. There's a few years here and there, usually between these different groups, but I go with Pew Research Center for these. So the silent generation being people born in 1928 to 1945. So these are birth years. The boomers are 1946 to 1964. Gen X generally 1965 to 1980. Millennial 1981 to 1996, and Gen Z 1997 to 2012. So look at that and realize that when we're talking about millennials, 40-year-olds and younger, 40-year-olds to 1990, people who were born in 1996. So millennials are not kids by any stretch. And Gen Z, a lot of them, more and more of them are turning 18 every day. So we're getting there. But these are actually adult generations at this point. So how to find this out? So first of all, you can talk to them. We exist out in your community. I'm a millennial and you're talking to one right now. And put these assumptions away that you might have about, oh, they're self-absorbed, or, oh, they're all whatever. Just be ready to listen. Fortunately, none of this information is hidden at all. So I included a link there, and we can explore it later, from a webcomic specifically about how to sell things and how not to sell things to millennials. This is something that is talked about very casually, and we can talk about factors and why that might be later on. So here's surveys and demographics that are actually put out by large agencies like Gallup or Pew Research Center. And these are the links to their actual entire topic pages. on generations in age and millennials in the case of Gallup. This is kind of one-stop shopping for big demographic surveys and kind of statistical breakdowns of specific attitudes, marketing, and political information that might be very useful for you in your research. But there's other ways to get around this, and we'll talk about why it's important to have other ways too. Media and pop culture. Sometimes you can't get everything you need because it takes time to actually ramp up a humongous survey like that. And to make things worse, a lot of millennials and Gen Z, I don't answer my phone unless it is actually a phone number that's already in my phone. I am absolutely not going to take your phone survey. This is a big enough problem that a lot of these agencies have had to come up with statistical ways to balance for that. And if it's bad enough for them to actually have to bake that into how surveys are done now, it's bad enough that it definitely slows down and complicates being able to do these large surveys. So while you're waiting, because a lot of the big surveys are not quite out yet, there's just been barely a few done yet on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we can talk about how to kind of get around that in the meantime by looking at media and pop culture. So put your historian hat on, which means that you're going to look at things not just for what it says on the surface, but also at explicit and implicit information, such as values contained behind a statement, like where is this coming from? Familiar things that don't need explaining. If someone doesn't bother, like that's always very interesting to me. If someone doesn't bother to explain how something is done or why it would be, that means that it's so familiar to themselves and their audience that they don't feel the need to explain it. So your little ears should perk up when you hear someone just name drop something you're not familiar with and then leave it there, because that says that that's something so familiar that they don't expect to have to explain it and they don't expect their audience to need it explained to them. So also look at data, popularity and success of something, which is very accessible actually with social media. You can look at shares, you can look at likes, you can look at ratios. Look at that data because that actually gives you a little benchmark for popularity and success of something. So you can use accessory information to kind of get around gaps in large studies that have been done. So let's talk about what you might find. As the portrait of a generation with mostly millennials, but also it's turning out very similar for Gen Z so far. And the data are still very new with Gen Z, but what we do have suggests they're very similar. They're more similar to millennials than not. Very frugal out of necessity and habit, highly educated, more highly educated than previous generations have been. Pragmatic, ruthless, and mercenary in their careers. No brand loyalty, like zero at all. Highly aware of advertising tactics, socially and ecologically conscious with a notable tendency to vote with the wallet and very connected. So these are things that come from, if you think about all those shared experiences and how this would impact people going through them at the points of their life. So frugal by necessity and habit. If your experience was you just graduated college with massive student debt and then immediately the economy implodes, and you spend quite a lot of time unemployed or in a very precarious position, that might drive a level of frugality and money consciousness and ruthlessness in terms of career, because we all saw what happened to people's parents during that downturn when they all got laid off, or what will immediately happen. Why be loyal to a company that absolutely has no loyalty beyond to their stockholders? And also zero brand loyalty. Again, you make a thing that I want at a price I want, or I am not going to buy it. Very simple. I don't care. I don't care about the rest of that. Highly aware of advertising tactics. So this is actually really interesting, and I think it might actually be blame Saturday morning cartoons, because we've been advertised directly to from literal infancy, very, very young age. So it develops instead of a kind of acute awareness that you are being advertised to when you watch commercials. I think there's an awareness that commercials are not useful information. There's someone trying to convince you to buy their stuff. And as for that, socially and ecologically conscious tendencies and to vote with a wallet, it'll be done very quietly. So you will not necessarily hear that, oh, you know, there's a huge boycott going on. It just may be quietly and informally, you know, maybe this is someone checking labels in the grocery store to make sure nothing's manufactured by Nestle. This could be something like that. So be aware that that could happen on a much quieter level, but also much broader than you're necessarily expecting, and very connected. I expect to be able to get in touch with key people when I need to. I expect asynchronous communication, such as texts or emails. So there's a level of connection and a level of kind of public life that we have. So how does this generational personality affect work? So once you hire one or are looking at one as a prospective employee, how does this actually impact how Gen Z and millennials behave at work? So this connectedness, they have widespread and valued networks, and there's a cosmopolitan review culture in that nobody is not expert enough to say what their opinion is on a particular product. We have all grown up with YouTube channels and what have you, constantly talking about whether they think it was any good. So there is this, everyone is going to be able to chime in on stuff, and everyone is going to be able to get in contact with each other, and we kind of take that for granted. Educated, a lot of them grew up in a highly competitive academic environment, and they like clear goals, deadlines, feedback, and progress. They want to know that they are given a mark to hit, that you get feedback back when you do or don't, and what they can improve and what they did well, and to know that they are making some kind of progress. Because if they've bothered to sink their time and energy into doing the thing, they really want to know that they're actually hitting that mark. Because there is something about being raised to, oh, you are going to get this grade to go to college, to have success, that basically trains you to think that way. So that is very much in there. It really helps to have clear goals, deadlines, feedback, and progress. And as for this pragmatic, mercenary, and ruthless tendency, you want concrete rewards with clear payoffs. How will this job further their careers? How will this help their life? For example, actually being able to say, we will offer you health insurance or skill building. This even extends to, I have read a few articles recently on how Gen Z and millennials are breaking the taboo about asking specifically how much money they will be paid in the interview, with the idea being that if you can't tell them what you expect to pay them for their time, you're not worth their time. So be aware that that could be something that would seem very rude or transgressive. This could be something that you will actually run into, and it's part of their filter. So they will probably prefer text-based and time-stamped communication. I, for one, love a good email and a good text, because what it gives you is, when was this sent? Who was it to? Who was it from? When was it read? And you have all of that right there and exactly what was said. There can be an aversion to using the phone. I don't like talking on the phone, especially for business stuff, because it's like, well, I want to have a record of exactly who said what when and how much everyone knows. And it's just much better. So email for business stuff, and text for the informal stuff. And they expect collaboration and networking to be able to put these connections to use. So there is this sort of different aims and goals, and much more pragmatic focused. So as for the personality in the market, so how do we actually sell things to them? They're very frugal and practical, often experience over things, secondhand shopping, life hacks in general, optimizing and loophole exploitation. There's this internal tendency, if you can somehow convince people that this is something that will concretely improve their life and it's the best, most efficient way to do it, you know, shut up and take my money. As long as you can actually convince someone that this has a place in their life. So as for no brand loyalty at all and awareness of advertising, be very careful about false sincerity. Sell products, not lifestyles, and give fact-based and data-driven information. I actually love 1950s car commercials where they explain that, oh, you know, it has windows and it has, you know, this many horsepower, and like they're giving you information about a car. I'm much more interested and compelled by that kind of thing than just every car commercial that's on TV right now, which is a picture of a car doing stuff. And the answer is, if you look at the average age of people buying cars, they're older than millennials, mostly because we cannot afford them new. And never, ever, as a result of these particular impulses, especially that optimizing loophole exploitation, don't you make a deal you can't afford. Beware the promotional deal. And that's what happened to Blue Apron, basically. So Blue Apron was, whatever happened to them. Anyway, it crashed and burned because they were one of those food meal delivery things where you could get all of their meal kits together and then you could cook it. But what they did was they pursued a loss leader strategy where the idea was to conquer the market first by selling their products at a loss. And then once they had gained market dominance, to start hiking up the price. And instead what happened was they did gain massive success for a little while they were cheaper. And then when they tried to move into phase 2, where they start boosting the price a little, people started running away and immediately dropped it like a hot potato. And that's also what straight up murdered MoviePass in dramatic fashion. Millennials and Gen Z will cancel that subscription on time. They're watching in their credit reports, and stuff from their credit card companies, like what they're paying for. And if they don't think there's a place for that, they will absolutely cancel it. So if there's a promotional deal that maybe you were depending on people to not make use of, be assured that with this generation, we'll probably use it and then absolutely drop it the second it's no longer advantageous. And people will only buy if they know they're getting a better value. So the problem with MoviePass is that movies are not a gym membership. There's nothing arduous about going to the movies. And what happened was, while it was a good deal, everyone went to the movies. And then the second it wasn't, it was just basically costing MoviePass an enormous amount of money because people were using all the tickets instead of just letting them sit. So as for COVID-19 and how this might affect people with that kind of personality, it's still very, very early on. So the data is still, like, the giant studies that are looking at the impacts of this are just beginning to come in. And there's no particularly good one that I really liked in the lead up to this. But from the discussion that I've seen on social media and in places where Millennials and Gen Z are themselves discussing it, it's very likely that this economic crisis precipitated by the pandemic will intensify traits like frugality and a mercenary attitude toward career advancement, because this is the second massive once-in-a-lifetime economic crisis that's happened in my lifetime. And I've simply come to the conclusion that life will be hard, like 1980s video game with a kill screen, hard. And so note that employers are reporting a labor shortage, but unemployment is low. That is actually a huge, huge tip off. And look at who is reporting a labor shortage. It is mostly restaurant and groceries and things that are customer facing services that pay low. And what has happened is people have just straight up fled while they could. And so everyone who could take a promotion to something else did. And no one really wants to go for those. So just be aware when you see something like that, that's probably telling you what people of an age to normally step into those jobs are doing. So a clear lesson from customer service during the pandemic was that your employer doesn't care whether you live or die, literally, and what amount of money is worth this. So that's probably a hint at why the struggles are happening in that sector. And that's something that is, again, quite openly discussed. The other thing is that nearly a huge number of us have direct experience in very miserable customer service type jobs. So that's something that most people our age can understand and empathize with. So as for hiring and retaining, Millennials and Gen Z are very aware of their budget and expected wages. And so in the face of past advice, just be prepared to discuss expected pay and benefits like health insurance right up front, and it will actually help you if you do a lot of the time. If you're a small employer and afraid you can't compete with larger companies' wages, consider offering other benefits to sweeten the pot and retain your talent, such as a flexible schedule, work from home, help finding housing, that's huge, carpool plan, paid leave. Like, think about what you can offer that isn't, if you can't afford a wage to compete with larger companies, think about other benefits that being a smaller, more nimble employer might be able to help you offer for your prospective Millennial and Gen Z cohorts that might be looking for a job with you. So as customers, they're aggressive shoppers and will compare prices and shop around to get the better deal, including online, once they've decided to buy. And they absolutely will skip buying something altogether if they can't find a price they find fair. And so in your advertising, explain in clear terms how your product will improve your customer's life and justify the price. Because that's the kind of thing that they're doing, and you are competing on a global marketplace. This is something that, you know, just be aware that you're being shopped very, very, very hard. So discussion time. Any questions, comments so far? Let's have a look in the chat. See how you guys are doing. Yep, splurge on vacations and music events. That's right. You got the feel for it. Good. Then we can talk about the other stuff too. So be ready to send more questions if you need it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop share because I'm sharing specifically the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to show you some things from the rest of it. So here we go, while I take you on a whirlwind tour of how you can find this stuff and what it looks like. So right here, let me show you. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my actual screen. So, whew. So here we are on the desktop. And so what we're going to do is we are just going to be prepared to look at some very interesting, shiny, shiny things and how this actually happens. So this, there we go, is the landing page for Pew Research's Generations in Age category. And what they do is they do very large, and the reason I like them is that they will include, whenever they talk about it, so like, let's get in this one. When they have an article, they will actually go down and talk about, they'll have little infographics, it'll be very nice, but they will also have about this essay. And at the very end, it will actually tell you more information about groups and analysis. So they will actually have an entire thing that breaks down the methodology for every single thing that you read on their site that is an article like that. So when they actually do, they will tell you who they contacted, how they contacted them, how they are analyzed, like how the recruitment worked. Like it is very, very thorough, and they show you how they got the sauce, basically, how the sausage was made, which is my favorite thing. So it will actually, they won't just throw you, here's your article, which is usually substantial. Look at all this article. They won't just throw you the article with the shiny infographics. They will also tell you specifically how they actually did the research, which is one reason why I like Pew Research Center, because it's very, very good, and it's very, very transparent, if you have a mind for that. Yay, Hamilton. Yeah. So that, and honestly, I have been kind of keeping an eye on the struggles of the situation on Broadway and what they're going to do about just the everything going on Broadway right now. There are actually entire subgenres, which we're going to get into right now. Entire subgenres. So if we look at the Gallup polls, here we go. So this is Gallup's little subtopic. We're going to let it load too. There we go. So here's right here, 4 things Gen Z and millennials expect from their workplace, like all of this kind of stuff. They do focus more on commercial stuff. Pew's great for an overview. They're not quite as, they don't really feel as rigorous or as transparent as Pew Research. But yeah, you can even look like, oh my gosh, yeah. Well, millennials finally get the workplace you want, like that implies the job switching situation. What disruption reveals, like all of this stuff and what's going on, create a culture that inspires, what meaningful feedback means to millennials. Like this is all stuff that's speaking to what we're talking about. Yeah, why millennials are job hopping, like what is going on. So that is the kind of thing that can definitely help you. And then as for pop culture and discussion, I want to show you what this conversation looks like so that you can get in there and look at it yourself, because there's entire hidden economies going on that are made possible by social media, basically, that would not be apparent if you are not familiar with it. So for quick reference, I'm going to try to get a metric on how we're doing with that. Let's get back into this. So how many of you currently watching the Zoom, how many of you are millennials? If you're a millennial, let us know. And then see how well you think the data reflect your experience, and like whether that's something you've noticed, because I find that it was stuff that I just took for granted, like, well, of course I'd look up the review online, which I'm honestly convinced a good chunk of that, maybe what partially killed Applebee's, is that what Applebee's was doing was it was consistent. It was for Applebee's, but you could at least expect, like, you knew what to expect. So if you were on a road trip, you could stop at an Applebee's and you would know what you were getting into. These days, if I'm traveling, what I do is I just I look at the reviews. So I think there's things that have happened just in terms of behavior and how people are engaging that really changed kind of how it's approached. So one of these things is actually through Google Maps, which, if you haven't played with it, is actually really worth playing with. So we're going to actually do that. Yeah, which is something, which is definitely something that I've done and I think is very worthwhile. So this actually, off we go to Google Maps. You can play with stuff and see how people have done. So it'll just, here's all these different, like, look at all of these restaurants, like, where are they? What are they doing? Why did it load there? That's really weird. All right, let's try it again. Load. All right. Well, that's some of them anyway. So if you get in here and you click on a restaurant, like, we're just gonna, this is a Wendy's. And you can look at the reviews. And you look at the review balance, and that's something that definitely people are looking at. And then you can look and see what people say and how recent it was. And the important thing is that this is also probably the first thing other people are looking at too. Maybe not necessarily Wendy's, but definitely a bunch of other stuff. And how this helps you is that as a small business owner, it can, even unintentionally, your interaction with that really matters. So my favorite little example of this is a little business called B&B Lamps and Shades. Which literally does exactly what it says on the tin. They sell lamps and they repair lamps, and that is their thing. And look at that outstanding score. And how this happens, like, 4.7, that is incredibly good. And so all they do is they do lamp stuff. And the important thing, and look at that ratio, that's great. And look at how this goes. So the important thing is that the owner actually responds to everything that comes up. So the owner is plugged into this, and that actually, I think, really helps, because their attitude toward the feedback that they're getting, despite everything, despite their niche, despite, being a local lamp sale and repair store, that's something that's probably really, really helping their business and their reputation, because it's kind of gotten this shine to it that this is the place, like, if you want a lamp, this is where you go. And yet this is something that is the kind of, like, they're still there. They've been there probably literally my entire life. I don't think I've ever known them to not be there. But this is an example of a small business in a very traditional industry that is nonetheless surviving and thriving, partly because of their proactive attitude toward dealing with feedback and stuff on social media. And in this case, just through the Google Maps, which, again, fascinating dynamic there. So other important thing, go to where millennials discuss things or Gen Z discusses things. One example is Reddit, and we're just gonna, how we get in there. So what they actually have is an entire subreddit about how, like, a discussion board. So a subreddit, if you have not used Reddit, Let's see, get out of my face. Ugh. I forgot how obnoxious this was on the window. Cool. Anyway, so what this actually has is, here's an entire discussion board of what is murdering industries, and the blaming it on millennials. So usually something happens, there's an article about it, and then people respond to it. So it's in the descriptions. And then so Business Insider runs an article a couple days ago about Gen Z killing Facebook. So let's see what people have to say about Gen Z killing Facebook, which is the interesting part. You know, so how people talk about it, and why they talk about it. I deleted my account 5 years ago. Just get your pictures off it and run. So like what people actually do use it for. So it actually has information about what people are using, why they're using. It opens it up to discussion with people of the similar thing. So this is actually a great resource, just knowing that these forums for discussion are there. And that is actually something that I think can be very, very useful, because again, in the absence of another large, you know, that's something that in the absence of another large study, while we're waiting for the proof to come out in the pudding after COVID-19, while we're waiting for that next big massive demographic survey to come out, and you can notice when those things are published, it takes a while to ramp up. It actually really helps. It actually really helps to get that information in here. So this is really, really useful. So be ready for this information. Yeah. And to look for places that would not necessarily be, you know, that would not necessarily be conventional research, but with your historian hat on, you can find these things and then use them while you're waiting for those next big demographic surveys. So on the topic of hidden economies, when I said there's entire hidden economies out there because of social media and what it's doing, here's a really quick example. Quick question, how many of you know about GDQ or Games Done Quick? So Games Done Quick is a speed running. We're just gonna let that pause. So Games Done Quick is a speed running charity marathon type thing, and they tend to do absolutely massive. And you can look like they, yeah, teaming up with several charities. So they've gone for 10 years already. Prevent Cancer Foundation and Doctors Without Borders, and so to date it's raised over $30 million. So they really do run a lot of that. Like this is an entire thing going on that you might not be familiar with if you are neither familiar with video games or aware that this is happening. Again, it's one of these you have to know it's there to know it's there sorts of things, but rest assured it's there. And here's an entire charity thing basically quietly running itself off YouTube, and you can get some absolutely fascinating, it'll give you absolutely fascinating things. If you just like seeing something done to a very high level of skill, this is also very interesting, and to see just how many people are interested in it, because it'll give you like, here's Dragon Age Inquisition, right? 142,000 views a year ago. Like it'll actually tell you, and you can use that as, you know, 5.4 million viewers to watch a taskbot play Brain Age. So it will give you information about how popular is this thing, how many people are into it. Ratios are really important. Yeah, Dragon Age. So it will give you information, and you have to know that these avenues for information sharing and for discussion are out there, and they are there to be engaged with. So that's Games Done Quick. There's also this weird little YouTube channel called Ants Canada. Let's go find it, because I think that it's exactly what it sounds like. So Ants Canada is an entire channel, pause, and an entire channel about this guy who has ants. And the ants, here we go, most recent video. So in 3 days, this recent one about Black Crazy Ants has gotten 210,000 views. That's an idea of just how quick this can go and just how much this guy's doing off literally ant farms, like not figuratively ant farms. I mean, actually this guy's business is running this YouTube channel and selling ants farms to people and ant farm paraphernalia, which is an entire crazy niche that's really only possible because of what social media can bring to an economy. So like this is something worldwide. This guy started in Canada and now lives, I think, in the Philippines, and just does ant farm stuff. So this is something that probably a small hobby shop locally that was an ant farm shop would have a very difficult time surviving. With social media and with that kind of global reach and with expecting people to engage, here's something actually carving out this crazy little niche that's doing very well for itself. And ants are interesting. So that's an example of how these hidden economies can be operating. And also there is straight up just business commentary and tiny documentaries on YouTube. If you watch any of these, watch Fort Nine's How Harley Davidson Killed Itself. And that gives you an idea. So Fort Nine is actually a discussion of motorcycles, and that How Harley Davidson Killed Itself video is actually about the business decisions that Harley Davidson made in terms of marketing, and how that's impacted it later on, and made it very difficult for the company to compete with younger people, because you may do very well by making a walled garden with a particular demographic for a while, but if you don't figure out how to sell your motorcycles to everybody, you're going to have a very difficult time. So there is straight up actual discussion, and quite a lot of it, of business itself and marketing as just something people engage in, straight up for you there on YouTube. If you find Reddit or something too arcane to deal with, or Google Maps to be too boring, there are actually a truckload of excellent business commentary that's available and is aimed at people who are millennials or Gen Z. And just be aware that this is the water they're swimming in, this kind of open discussion of whether or not that particular marketing campaign going on right now is a success or a failure, and why it happened. So it's not like this is hidden information. This is open, direct information about how this is all happening. And it's very, very accessible. Yeah. Very, very accessible. So you can get people, yeah, so this little video actually has 4.2 million views. And then here's all the people discussing this video and what happened with it. So it's not just, oh, there's a marketing campaign. It's actually marketing campaign and business decisions as a spectator sport, effectively. So be aware that that kind of thing can definitely happen. And that this is something to be very alert to, in that being aware that your marketing stuff isn't just a single, like it isn't just a single decision. This is actually going to be something that itself becomes important enough to discuss and to pick apart, and that itself is everything there, and people will be talking about it, just absolutely will be talking about it. Do we have anything else you guys want to ask? Questions, comments, feedback, all kinds of stuff. They covered a lot of ground, and we've got 15 minutes left for the discussions or for questions. Anything you found interesting, stuff you've seen in your coworkers or employees, or particularly thorny cases where you were like, well, you know, why did they do that, or what is happening? Well, how is it hard, you know, how is it so hard and so easy to get in touch with people? Really, these things all have an impact, and how that happens I think it's very important to be aware that this has become something that people are very alert to, and that millennials and Gen Z, it can happen very quietly and in forums that if you don't know that that's where the discussion's happening, you may not be alert to that's what's going on. So for example, the Nestle thing that I was discussing, if you want to see where that discussion's happening, there's a subreddit called Hydro Homies that's literally about drinking more water, and people will discuss why they don't do Nestle products. Oh, good. Yeah, you're welcome. And it's very, I think it can be very good knowing that it can happen. Yeah, and then it can help you figure out like if there was a, if there was a marketing failure or something just spectacularly flopped, or we're really having trouble pulling in people, it can help you figure out like kind of what's been happening, and that this sort of thing, is kind of quietly going on, and that there are avenues and places in which this discussion is happening that may not be easily accessible. I think probably the easiest access forum for discussion is Facebook, but with millennials and Gen Z abandoning Facebook, that itself was a very interesting. Yeah, no, like there's nothing there's nothing at all wrong with you. That's very much just kind of how we've been tuned by common experiences. There's nothing particularly broken. I think it's just that people aren't aware of just the impacts, the solid impact a lot of these experiences have had. Ooh, yeah, so that's a good one. Why are Gen Zs considered more likely to describe themselves as introverts rather than extroverts? If we've had a choice between, like, again, if you give me a choice between text and phone call, I will choose text every single time. If you give, and I think Gen Z is probably even more like that if given a choice between, dealing with, and that may sound more direct, right, to have a phone call, or more extroverted to have a phone call. And also, I am absolutely not answering my door unless, like, just text me like a normal person. Like, you drive to my house and you text me when you get there and I will let you in. Like, I am not answering a doorbell. Super not happening. So it's like, it's little things like that where there's a level of comfort and a level of second nature to phones and to instant communication, basically, that I think is taken very much for granted by millennials and Gen Z. Something that I always tell people is it's not something magical about millennials and Gen Z. It's that literally practice. I ask people when there's computer classes, how many hours have you spent on a computer today? And they'll look at me and I say, okay, because when I woke up this morning, it was because an alarm on my phone went off. And then when I get my coffee, I read the news on my phone. And then I go to work where, because I'm a librarian, my job is 8 hours a day on the computer. And then I go home, and tonight it's going to be probably 8 p.m. by the time I get home. And then I will get on the PlayStation 4. Like that is almost literally every waking moment. If you want an exercise routine, well, here's Just Dance. Get in touch with your friends, that's what the group chat's for via text. There's very, very much like what that means to be a digital native is, it's an enormous amount of practice. And I always tell people, like, just practice, practice, practice. But I think that if you define extrovert as someone who spends a lot of time talking to people in person and likes doing that, and whether that gives you energy, I think that's probably why Gen Zs are more likely to describe themselves as introverts, is that they might prefer it in an asynchronous, time-stamped kind of way. Any other questions, comments, stuff I can help you with or thinking about, or whatever else, stuff you found useful, want more information on? Because there probably is. This is very much kind of a high level overview.
Let me ask you this though, Catherine. So from a business owner standpoint, and you're just sitting down to maybe craft a new marketing message. I mean, just distill it down. What would be the the steps? Let's just say you want to target millennials. What would be the steps to do research to understand more fully and maybe, kind of craft some things that can help you with your branding and your marketing, your messaging, your channel selection?
Yeah, so to help you with that, so to help you with figuring that out, like I said, there's kind of get more comfortable aside from this high level overview. Aside from this high level overview, one of the things that really helps is to look at what millennials and what Gen Z are you actually targeting, because there is going to be a difference between, how they approach stuff and what they're interested in, and then find those places where the discussion is happening. So think about the people that will be so if you're targeting millennials, think about where this discussion is going to happen among the people that you want to be interested in your product, and then go to those places and find out what discussions are going on. What are they talking about? What are their values that are implicit? Because if there are things that people don't even bother to explain, that's an implicit, like that should flag immediate attention that, oh, we're talking about an implicit value. If you're talking to someone who happens to drop the idea that they will literally, they'll never buy Nestle again, and are really going to trouble of like making sure none of their cat food is Nestle or something like really, okay. And then they don't explain why, go figure out where that discussion is happening, and then be like, all right, well, what happened? And then what's going on that's causing that buying behavior? So that's what I would do is first question, find out where the discussion is happening, and then go try to see what the implicit values are that's going on. And just remember, rule of thumb, explain what is this thing? Like, tell me, what is this thing you're trying to sell me? And then explain to me literally why it would be worth me paying you X amount of money for it. Be explicit about how much it will be, and be explicit about why it is literally a good value. Which sounds extremely crass, but it's definitely appreciated. Man, there was an entire hit song, I think in 2012, Macklemore, of all things, Thrift Shop, which if you haven't seen it, just cue that up on your phone and go watch it. Macklemore, Thrift Shop. It's literally an entire song about why you should shop at Goodwill.
Nice.
So it's very, these conversations are happening, and that's probably the thing that I would do, is to figure out if what you're looking to do is justify how people can buy your thing, like why they would, pop the tags. Exactly. $20 in my pocket.
So
so that's definitely what I would do. And then if you can't answer that, so that's the other worrying thing, and kind of why a lot of things have been struggling with this, is if you cannot answer that question, if you can't justify why you should buy the thing at the price, people are just straight up not going to buy it. So that's your red flag.
So I guess on the flip side, let's just say I'm a small business owner, and I want to maybe launch a new product or service. I can flip this sort of thing and look for a problem to solve too, can't I? What would you recommend on that?
Ooh, so if you're looking, let me make sure I understand you right. So yeah, exactly. So you can look for what are the problems precisely. So if you haven't yet crafted what it is you're trying to sell, look for the problems that are being had, and then look for a way to fill that gap or fill that need. And that is a brilliant way to go about it, and probably the best way to go about it. And also we tend to react very, very poorly to high pressure sales tactics. I hate hard sells. It's just like, look, are you going to give me the thing for the money or not? Like if I bothered, because so I recently bought a car, and my process was literally to quietly shop, including the history of the cars that I was looking at that was on the lot before I even got there, like days before I even contacted and told them that I was interested in it. So it's like, dude, I know you've dropped, like, don't don't play this game. Like, I know you've dropped the price recently because you're having trouble with it. Like, you're having trouble selling it. Like, don't pretend like I haven't been paying attention to that. And so the chances are very good that whoever you're talking to actually has already figured out, like, especially for a high price thing like that, has already figured that maybe they're interested in this specific thing. And they might be very resistant to upselling. They'll probably be very resistant to high pressure tactics because of that, in that they've already, like, if their butt is in your dealership, they have already decided to buy the thing probably 90%. So that's the other thing, is that there can be very distinct differences in terms of how you would sell something to someone once you have decided there's a need to be filled. So that's something that I think is very important. And that also kind of dovetails with the kids.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't forgotten you, Kathy Pyrek. That's actually something about having children and kind of what people really need with that. There's a lot of needs to be filled. But I think the biggest research regarding millennials and Gen Z and kids, and this should probably tell you the tenor of this conversation, the research regarding millennials and Gen Z on kids is less about how their decisions once they have kids are different. It's why they're not having kids.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, like, honestly, the big thing is that there's a lot of worry about millennials and Gen Z getting married and having kids much, much later in life. And why that is. And, you know, pro tip, it's economic. It really is economic. You know, that really is it's probably the biggest factor, is kids are expensive. So if you can, like, especially if you're looking at that need and you're like, oh, you know, can I sell something, you know, at a better price point that would be very useful if you have kids, that would be great. But yeah, look for a need and then craft something to fill it, and look for where those discussions are happening. And you'll notice the needs pop up, because there are a lot of needs. It's not like millennials and Gen Z don't need stuff.
Right.
It's that they're going to shop very aggressively once they've identified a need.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. That was really good.
Oh, thank you.
I will say though that Kathy Pyrek has the coolest business in town. That's all I can say.
Oh, excellent.
It's really interesting. So looks like that's all the questions. We're right at the top of the hour too. So Katherine, I want to thank you for joining us today. And
well, thank you.
I also want to thank you what you do as a librarian, because the things that you do for the people that come to the library are just so valuable, and all the resources you have are also so valuable. We use you guys all the time, and that's why you're here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you do. And so we'll get back to the bowels of the library there and what goes on all day. So again, if you guys will just hang on a second, we click off, then there'll be a survey that pops up, and we appreciate a little bit of feedback from you guys. That'd be great. And we'll send you a recording, and Kathy will share, Katherine will share the slides and some of the resources. We'll send that all out to you as well, so you guys can have that. So, but as always, you can reach out to us directly. We'd be happy to help, and you can reach Katherine at the Louisville Free Public Library. She's there to help. So Katherine, thank you so much. Janet, thanks for all your help as always.
Thanks, Dave.
And we will see you guys next time on a Toolkit Tuesday. Take care now.